The lights in Dr. Hannah Park's office buzzed quietly in the late evening. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the computer screen again. The alien message she had been trying to decode for 3 weeks finally made sense. Her hands started shaking. The words on the screen were clear now. Trade records, auction prices, common descriptions. But these were not normal goods. These were children. Human children. Thousands of them. Hannah stood up quickly, knocking her chair backward. She grabbed her phone and called her boss. Her voice was shaking when he answered. "Director Kim, you need to come to my office right now. I found something terrible." 30 minutes later, Director Taeyang Kim stood behind Hannah, reading the translated messages. His face turned white. He was a military man, strong and calm in every situation, but now his hands were gripping the desk so hard his knuckles turned white. "How many?" he asked quietly. "The records go back 30 years, Hannah said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Over 12,000 children. They took them from the outer colonies, places where people thought they just disappeared or died in accidents." Taeyang closed his eyes. 30 years ago, his younger sister had disappeared from a frontier colony. She was only 8 years old. The officials said it was a transport accident. They never found her body. "Who did this?" he asked. "The Valtari Empire," Hannah answered. "They have been taking our children and selling them as slaves across the galaxy." Within hours, the information reached the highest levels of Earth's government. Emergency meetings were called. Leaders who had not spoken to each other in years suddenly sat in the same room. The evidence was checked and checked again. Every time the answer was the same. It was real. It was happening. The news was kept secret at first, but someone leaked a report to the public networks. Within a day, every human in the solar system knew the truth. People stopped working. They stood in the streets reading the news on their devices. Parents held their children closer. Old soldiers who had not touched a weapon in decades went to recruitment centers. The Earth Council met in Geneva. Representatives from every nation filled the Great Hall. For the first time in human history, there were no arguments about borders or resources or old hatreds. Everyone wanted the same thing. Taeyang Kim was asked to present the military intelligence. He stood before the council and showed them everything. Valtari ships entering human space, disappearance patterns matching their trade routes, communications between slave traders discussing the value of human children. "They chose children because they are easier to control," Taeyang explained. His voice was steady, but his eyes were cold with anger. "They took them young so they would forget their homes. They sold them to buyers across 50 different star systems." The council chamber was silent. Then one representative stood up. Then another. Soon everyone was standing. The vote was unanimous. Earth would demand the return of every human child. And if the Valtari refused, there would be war. The Earth government sent a message to the Galactic Council. They presented all the evidence. They demanded action. They asked for justice. The Galactic Council's response came 3 days later. It was short and cold. The message said that what the Valtari Empire did within their own territory was their own business. The Council would not interfere with internal affairs. They suggested humanity accept compensation and move forward. The humans who read that message felt something break inside them. The galaxy did not care. The great civilizations that talked about peace and justice did not care about human children being sold like animals. Then something unexpected happened. A message came from a neutral trading station. A human boy had escaped from a slave ship. His name was Hyun Lee. He was 16 years old. He had been taken when he was 6. Hannah Park flew to the station personally. She found Hyun in a medical room, thin and scared but alive. When she told him he was going home, he started crying. He had forgotten what home looked like. Hyun's testimony was recorded and broadcast across Earth. He spoke in a quiet voice about the metal collar they put on him, about the other human children in the slave pens, about the buyers who examined them like they were products, about the children who got sick and were thrown away. When the broadcast ended, something changed in humanity. The sadness turned into rage. The rage turned into purpose. Military recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Volunteers lined up for blocks. Factory workers asked to build warships. Scientists offered their research for weapon development. Children donated their savings. Old enemies became allies. Earth's separate military forces began to merge. Ships from different nations painted the same symbol on their hulls, a blue planet Earth with the words underneath, "Bring them home." Taeyang Kim was chosen to command the United Earth Fleet. It was a fleet that did not exist 6 months ago. Now it was growing every day. He stood in the command center and watched the construction yards working day and night. New ships taking shape, weapons being loaded, soldiers training. Hana Park became the intelligence director. She built a network of informants across the galaxy. Some were sympathetic aliens. Others were escaped slaves. All of them wanted to help. She collected information on every Valtari slave facility, every trade route, every buyer. Young Captain Minho Choi led the special forces. He was an orphan who grew up in military schools. Now he trained teams for rescue operations. They practiced breaking into slave facilities. They learned Valtari ship layouts. They prepared for the worst. Lieutenant Jiwon Song was the best fighter pilot in the fleet. She had lost her younger brother to a colony raid 5 years ago. Now she trained other pilots. She taught them to be fast and aggressive. She taught them to never give up. The Valtari Empire sent a message to Earth. It was a warning. They said humanity should not interfere. They said they were a powerful empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They said humans were nothing. Taeyang Kim read the message and deleted it. He did not bother to reply. 6 months after Hana Park decoded that first message, the United Earth Fleet was ready. 800 warships, 50,000 Marines, millions of support personnel, all focused on one mission. Taeyang stood before his officers and gave them their orders. The room was packed with people from every nation on Earth. Different languages, different cultures, different histories, but now they were all the same. They were human, and they were going to bring their children home. The Valtari think we will negotiate, Taeyang said. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the iron in it. They think we will accept compensation. They think we will forget. They are wrong. He looked around the room at the faces watching him. They took our children. They sold them like cargo. The galaxy may not care, but we do. Every single child will come home. I do not care how long it takes. I do not care what it costs. We bring them all home. The officers stood and saluted. Outside, the fleet began to move. Humanity was going to war. The first strike happened at dawn. 7 different locations across the outer rim. 7 Valtari slave facilities, all attacked at the same moment. Captain Minho Choi stood in the transport ship as it approached the largest facility. Around him, 50 Marines checked their weapons. They had trained for this moment for months. Now it was real. 2 minutes, the pilot announced. Minho looked at his soldiers. Some were young. Some were old. All had volunteered. Many had lost family members to the slave raids. Remember your training, Minho said. Find the children. Protect them. Everything else is secondary. The transport shook as it landed hard on the facility's outer platform. The doors burst open. The Marines ran out into the Valtari compound. The Valtari guards were surprised. They had never been attacked before. They thought their empire was too powerful. They were wrong. The fighting was brutal and quick. Minho led his team through the corridors. They followed the maps that Hana Park's intelligence network had provided. Every turn was exactly where she said it would be. They reached the holding area. Minho's heart was pounding. He used the explosive charge on the door. The metal bent and broke. Inside, he saw them, children, dozens of them. Thin and scared and dirty. Some were very young. Some were teenagers. All of them had metal collars around their necks. All of them shrank back when the door exploded. We are human, Minho said, taking off his helmet so they could see his face. We are from Earth. We are here to take you home. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one small girl started crying. Then another child. Then all of them. The Marines moved forward carefully, removing the collars, wrapping the children in blankets, carrying the ones who could not walk. Above the planet, Lieutenant Jiwon Song flew her fighter through enemy fire. Her squadron of 12 ships faced 30 Valtari warships. The odds were bad. She did not care. Break formation, she ordered. Independent attack patterns. Make them chase you. The human fighters scattered. The Valtari ships tried to follow standard battle tactics. They moved in organized groups, supporting each other with coordinated fire. It was how they had fought for thousands of years. But Jiwon did not fight by their rules. She dove straight at the largest enemy ship, firing all her weapons. At the last second, she rolled aside. The Valtari ship could not turn fast enough. It crashed into another ship behind it. Her squadron followed her example. They flew in ways that made no tactical sense. They took risks that seemed suicidal. The Valtari could not predict what they would do next. "All ships, this is Song," Jiwan called out. "The transport is loaded. Cover their escape." The fighters formed up around the transport carrying Minho and the rescued children. They flew through the enemy fire. 2 human ships were hit and destroyed. Their pilots did not eject. They steered their burning fighters into enemy vessels, clearing the path. The transport made it through. Jiwan looked at the empty spots in her formation where her pilots had been. She felt the anger burning in her chest. "Mark their names," she said quietly. They brought the children home. Similar scenes played out across all 7 facilities. The human forces struck hard and fast. The Valtari had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that fought with pure fury. An enemy that would sacrifice everything for a rescue mission. In one facility, the Valtari commander tried to use the children as hostages. He gathered 50 of them in a room and threatened to kill them if the humans did not retreat. Captain Minho's response was simple. He ordered his snipers to shoot through the walls. The Valtari guards fell before they could react. The children were saved. At another location, the Valtari tried to destroy their records. Hyun Lee, who had volunteered to help the military, identified the data systems. Human tech specialists broke the security and copied everything: names, dates, buyers, locations, all the evidence they needed. Admiral Taeyang Kim watched the reports coming in from his flagship. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were shaking slightly. Each report meant more children saved. Each number represented a life that would see Earth again. Dr. Hannah Park stood next to him, reading the data. She was crying openly. 2,147, she said. "That is how many we saved today." "And how many are still out there?" Taeyang asked. Hannah looked at the intelligence reports. Her face was grim. "At least 40,000 more. Maybe 50,000. The records we found show sails across hundreds of star systems." Taeyang nodded slowly. He knew this was just the beginning. The rescued children arrived at the fleet's medical ships. Doctors and nurses were waiting. Many of the children were sick. Some had injuries. All of them were traumatized. One nurse knelt down in front of a young boy who looked about 8 years old. He stared at her with empty eyes. "What is your name?" she asked gently. The boy did not answer. He had forgotten his name. He had been a slave for so long he did not remember being anything else. "It is okay," the nurse said. "We will help you remember. You are safe now." The videos of the rescues were broadcast across Earth. People watched the Marines carrying children out of the slave facilities. They watched the emotional reunions with families who had thought their children were dead. They watched the empty-eyed children who did not remember their homes. The reaction was immediate. More volunteers joined the military. More resources were sent to the fleet. The message was clear. Earth would not stop until every child was home. The Valtari Empire released an official statement. They called the human attacks an act of war. They said humanity had violated galactic law. They demanded that humans leave their territory immediately. Admiral Taeyang Kim recorded a response. It was broadcast across the galaxy. "You took our children and sold them as slaves. You violated the most basic right of every sentient species. We gave you a chance to return them peacefully. You refused. Now we will take them back by force. This is not a negotiation. This is not a diplomatic incident. This is war." In the medical bay, Captain Minho Choi sat with the children his team had rescued. A little girl climbed into his lap. She held on to him like he might disappear. "Are you really taking us home?" she whispered. Minho felt his throat tighten. He nodded. "Yes, I promise. We are taking all of you home. No matter what it takes." The girl closed her eyes and fell asleep in his arms. Minho looked around at all the other children. Some were sleeping. Some were crying. Some were staring at nothing. He thought about the thousands more still out there, still in chains, still being sold, still suffering. The war had just begun, and humanity would not stop until it was finished. 8 months had passed since the first strike. The war had spread across dozens of star systems. The United Earth fleet was stretched thin, hunting slave operations wherever they could be found. Dr. Hannah Park worked 18 hours a day in the intelligence center. Her team had grown. Now she had informants across the galaxy. Some were sympathetic aliens who hated slavery. Others were escaped slaves from different species. All of them wanted to help. She stared at the star map on her screen. Red dots marked known slave facilities. Yellow dots marked suspected locations. Blue dots showed where human children had been sold to private buyers. There were hundreds of dots. "We have confirmed another location," one of her analysts said. "A hidden station in the Kelvar system. Intelligence suggests at least 200 human children there." Hana marked the location and sent the data to Admiral Kim. Within hours, a strike team would be on its way. This was how every day went now. Find them, send the coordinates, rescue them, start again, but the Valtari were learning. They had started setting traps. Captain Minho Choi led his team toward a facility on a frozen moon. Intelligence said it held 300 children. The security looked light. Too light. Minho felt something was wrong. "This is a trap," he said over the comm link. "Confirmed trap," came the response from their scout. "Heavy Valtari forces hidden in the nearby asteroid field. They are using the children as bait." Minho looked at his Marines. They were ready to fight. They were ready to die if necessary. But the children were still in that facility. Real children, not fake bait. "We are going in anyway," Minho decided. "But we are going to turn their trap against them." He sent a coded message to Lieutenant Jiwon Song's fighter squadron. Then he led his team directly into the facility, exactly as the Valtari expected. The Valtari ambush forces emerged from the asteroids, surrounding the human transport. They prepared to destroy it. They were confident. They had superior numbers and firepower. Then Jiwon's fighters came screaming out of the sun. The Valtari had been watching the facility. They had not noticed the human fighters using the star's radiation to hide their approach. The battle was chaos. Jiwon's pilots flew like demons, targeting the enemy command ships first. Inside the facility, Minho's team moved fast. They found the children and started evacuating them through a side entrance the Valtari did not know humans had discovered. The Valtari commander realized too late what had happened. The humans had walked into his trap knowing it was a trap. They had prepared their own counterattack. By the time he understood, the children were already gone and his fleet was burning. Minho captured the Valtari second in command during the evacuation. The alien was brought back to the fleet for interrogation. He gave up information about other facilities, other trade routes, other buyers. The Valtari military did not train their officers to resist interrogation. They had never needed to. Hyun Lee had become a valuable member of Hana's intelligence team. He understood how the Valtari thought. He knew their protocols. He could identify which facilities would have the most security and which would have the most children. One day he was reviewing captured security footage from a liberated station. He saw a face he recognized. The Valtari who had owned him. The one who had put the collar around his neck when he was 6 years old. His hands started shaking. Hana noticed and came over. "What is wrong?" she asked gently. Hyun pointed at the screen. His voice was barely a whisper. "That is him. That is the one who took me." Hana checked the identification. The Valtari's name was Trade Master Vex. He was one of the senior leaders of the slave trade. And according to current intelligence, he was still operating from a facility in the Outer Rim. "We will get him," Hana promised. "I will make sure of it." On Earth, the economy had completely converted to war production. Factories that once made civilian goods now built weapons and ships. Volunteers worked around the clock. Resources that used to be spent on luxury items were redirected to the military. Nobody complained. Everyone had seen the videos of the rescued children. Everyone knew someone who had lost a family member to the slave raids. The entire human species was united in purpose. The Valtari Empire sent another diplomatic mission to Earth. They offered a deal. If humanity stopped the attacks, the Valtari would pay compensation. They would return some of the children. They would promise to stop taking new slaves. Admiral Taeyang Kim met with the Valtari diplomats personally. He listened to their offer without interruption. When they finished, he stood up. "Your offer is rejected," he said coldly. "We do not want compensation. We do not want promises. We want every human child returned. Every single one. And we want the people responsible to face justice. There will be no peace until that happens." The Valtari diplomats tried to argue. They said humanity was being unreasonable. They said the war was costing both sides too much. They said the Galactic Council wanted a peaceful resolution. Taeyang walked to the door and opened it. "Get out," he said, "and tell your empire that humanity does not negotiate with slavers. We destroy them." The rejection was broadcast across the galaxy. It sent a clear message. Humanity would not compromise. Humanity would not tire. Humanity would not stop. Something unexpected began to happen. Small alien species that had also suffered under Valtari oppression started helping humanity secretly. They provided intelligence. They offered their space stations as supply points. Some even sent volunteers to join the human military. The galaxy was watching. They saw a young species taking on an ancient empire. They saw humans refusing to back down despite the odds. They saw the determination in every battle, every rescue, every sacrifice. Some species started to wonder, if humans could stand up to the Valtari, maybe they could too. If humans could fight for their children, maybe others could fight for their rights. The seeds of rebellion were being planted across the galaxy. Lieutenant Jiwan Song's squadron conducted a raid on a Valtari supply depot. They needed military codes and security protocols. The raid was supposed to be quick and quiet. It did not go as planned. The Valtari had more defenses than expected. Jiwan's fighter was hit. Her engines were damaged. She was surrounded by enemy ships. Her squadron came back for her. They flew into the middle of the enemy formation, taking hits to cover her escape. 2 pilots were killed. 3 more were wounded. But they got Jiwan out. And they got the data they came for. In the medical bay afterward, Jiwan sat with the wounded pilots. She felt guilty that they had risked their lives for her. "Do not feel bad, Lieutenant," one of them said. "We are all in this together. We save each other. That is what humans do." After 8 months of constant operations, Hana's intelligence network finally found what they had been searching for, the location of the central Valtari slave processing world, a planet called Terminus Prime. According to the intelligence, over 30,000 human children were being held there. It was the largest concentration of slaves in the Empire. It was also the most heavily defended location in Valtari space. Hana brought the information to Admiral Kim. He studied the reports for a long time. The defense would be massive. The casualties would be high. But 30,000 children were there. He called a meeting of all senior officers. The fleet was tired. They had been fighting for 8 months without rest. But when he showed them the intelligence on Terminus Prime, every officer volunteered immediately. Taeyang stood before them and spoke clearly. 30,000 children are on that planet. We are going to bring them home. I will not lie to you. This will be the hardest battle we have faced. Many of us will not survive. But those children are counting on us. Earth is counting on us. We will not fail them. The fleet began preparing for the assault. Every ship, every Marine, every pilot. They all knew what was coming. They all knew the stakes. The long hunt was about to reach its climax. The United Earth Fleet assembled near the edge of Valtari space. Over 800 warships, thousands of support vessels, 50,000 Marines ready for ground assault. It was the largest military force humanity had ever gathered. Admiral Taeyang Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display. Terminus Prime was shown in the center. Around it, red markers showed the Valtari defense fleet. There were over 2,000 enemy ships. The odds were terrible. But 30,000 children were on that planet. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer said. Taeyang nodded. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Kim. In a few minutes we will jump to Terminus Prime. The enemy outnumbers us 3-1. They have stronger shields and heavier weapons. By every calculation we should lose this battle." He paused and looked around his bridge at the officers watching him. But calculations do not account for what we are fighting for. They do not measure determination. They do not understand that we will die before we leave those children behind. The Valtari think they know war. They are about to learn what it means when humanity goes to war. Across the fleet, crews prepared for battle. Weapons were charged. Engines were ready. Marines checked their gear one last time. Everyone knew many of them would not survive the day. Nobody hesitated. "Jump in 30 seconds, the navigation officer announced. Lieutenant Jiwan Song sat in her fighter cockpit. Her squadron was ready to launch the moment they arrived. She looked at the photos attached to her control panel. Her younger brother. The children they had already rescued. The ones still waiting. "All fighters, this is Song," she said over the squadron channel. "We are the first wave. We hit them hard and we hit them fast. Make every shot count." The fleet jumped. Space around Terminus Prime suddenly filled with human ships. The Valtari defense fleet immediately moved to engage. Their formations were perfect. Their tactics were exactly what military doctrine required. They had fought this way for thousands of years. Then the human attack began, and it made no sense. Half the human fleet charged straight at the enemy center. It looked like suicide. The Valtari concentrated their fire, preparing to destroy the attackers. But those human ships were not really attacking. They were broadcasting false identification codes. Codes that had been stolen from Valtari military systems months earlier. Codes that identified them as friendly vessels. The Valtari automated defense systems hesitated. For just 3 seconds they tried to verify the signals. 3 seconds where they did not fire. 3 seconds was enough. The real attack came from above and below. Human ships that had approached using the planet's magnetic field to hide. They hit the Valtari fleet's flanks with everything they had. Jiwan's fighter squadron screamed through the chaos. They targeted the command ships, the vessels coordinating the Valtari defense. Without clear orders, the enemy fleet started to lose cohesion. Then the confusion got worse. The false identification codes caused Valtari ships to fire on each other. In some sectors, entire groups of enemy vessels were destroyed by their own fleet before they realized what was happening. Admiral Taeyang watched the battle unfold exactly as planned. Years of studying Valtari tactics had revealed their weakness. They relied too much on automated systems. They trusted their technology more than their judgment. And when that technology was compromised, they fell apart. "Launch the ground forces," he ordered. Captain Minho Choi felt the transport shake as it entered the atmosphere. He stood with his Marines, 50,000 strong, all heading to the surface. They had studied the layout of the slave facilities. They knew where the children would be. The landing was hot. Valtari ground defenses fired at the transports. Some were hit. Marines died before they even reached the ground. But the transports kept coming, wave after wave. Minho's unit landed near the largest facility complex. It was a massive structure built into the side of a mountain. Security was heavy. Guard towers, automated weapons, force fields. "All units advance," Minho ordered. The Marines moved forward under fire. Combat engineers blew holes in the walls. Assault teams poured through. The fighting was brutal. Room by room, corridor by corridor. Inside the facility, Trademaster Vex watched the human attack on his security screens. He could not believe what he was seeing. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be easily controlled. But these humans fought like nothing he had ever witnessed. He made a decision. If he could not keep the slaves, he would destroy them. He would not let the humans have them. Vex activated the facility's self-destruct system. Timers started counting down. In 30 minutes, the entire complex would explode. All the children would die. But Vex had forgotten about Hyun Lee. Hyun was with the assault force. He had volunteered to guide them through the facility. He knew the layout better than any blueprint. He had lived here once. He knew every corridor, every door, every security system. When the alarms started blaring, Hyun knew what they meant. "Self-destruct," he shouted to Minho. "We have maybe 20 minutes. "Can you disable it?" Minho asked. "No, but I can get us to the children faster. Follow me." Hyun led them through maintenance tunnels that the Valtari guards did not even know existed. Tunnels that slaves used to move through the facility unseen. They reached the holding areas in minutes instead of hours. The doors burst open. The children inside screamed in fear. Then they saw the humans. They saw the Earth symbols on the uniforms. They saw people who looked like them. "We are here to take you home," Minho said. "But we need to move fast. Can you run?" The children ran. Some were carried. Some helped each other. The Marines formed a protective circle around them as they evacuated through the tunnels. They reached the transports with 3 minutes to spare. As the last transport lifted off, the facility exploded behind them. The shockwave rocked the ships, but they were already clear. Trademaster Vex tried to escape in his personal ship. He got as far as orbit before Jiwan Song's squadron intercepted him. She recognized his vessel from the intelligence reports. "This is Lieutenant Song to Valtari vessel. Surrender or be destroyed." Vex tried to run. Jiwan disabled his engines with a precise shot. Her squadron surrounded him. He had nowhere to go. When Vex was brought to the fleet in chains, Hyun Lee was waiting. He looked at the alien who had stolen 10 years of his life. The alien who had hurt so many children. Vex recognized him and laughed. "You were always weak," Vex said in broken human language. "All your kind are weak." Hyun smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Look around you," Hyun said quietly. Your fleet is destroyed. Your facility is rubble. 30,000 children are free, and you are in chains. Tell me again who is weak. Vex had no answer. The battle for Terminus Prime lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Valtari defense fleet was destroyed. Every slave facility on the planet was liberated. Over 30,000 human children were rescued. The cost was high. 300 human ships were lost. 5,000 Marines and crew members died. But they died winning the greatest victory in human history. The images of the liberation spread across the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement. The humans had defeated the Valtari. The empire that had ruled for millennia had been broken by a young species fighting for their children. On ships across the empire, Valtari slave species saw what happened. They saw that the empire could be beaten. They saw that their masters were not invincible. Rebellions began, small at first, then larger. The Valtari Empire started to crack. Dr. Hannah Park stood in the medical bay, watching the rescued children. Doctors and nurses were treating them. Some children laughed for the first time in years. Others cried. All of them were finally safe. She recorded a message that was broadcast across every known frequency in the galaxy. To every empire, every government, every species that profits from slavery, humanity is watching. We know who you are. We know what you do. And we are coming. There will be no mercy. There will be no peace. Free your slaves or face us. That is not a threat. That is a promise. The galaxy trembled. The war had been going on for 16 months. After the victory at Terminus Prime, the momentum shifted. The Valtari Empire was no longer invincible. Subject species were rebelling. Trade routes were collapsing. The ancient empire was dying, but Overlord Krell refused to surrender. He pulled back all remaining forces to the Valtari homeworld. He built defenses that made Terminus Prime look weak. He swore that humanity would break against his final stronghold. The Galactic Council finally took notice. They could no longer ignore what was happening. A delegation arrived at the human fleet, asking for a meeting with Admiral Kim. The council representatives sat across from Taeyang in the conference room. They were nervous. They had seen what humans could do when they were angry. Admiral Kim, the lead representative, said carefully, "The council wishes to negotiate a peaceful end to this conflict. The Valtari have offered to pay reparations. They will return the remaining human captives. Surely this is enough." Taeyang looked at them with cold eyes. "Where was the council when we first brought evidence of the slave trade? Where were you when we asked for help? You did nothing. You told us to accept compensation and move on. Now that we are winning, now you want peace?" The representatives shifted uncomfortably. "The council was wrong to ignore your request," one admitted quietly. "But continuing this war will only bring more death, more suffering." "Is that what you want?" Taeyang stood up. "There will be peace when every human child is returned. When the Valtari leadership faces justice for their crimes. When the galaxy knows that slavery will not be tolerated. Until then, there is only war." Dr. Hannah Park had more to say. She pulled up files on her computer and projected them for the council to see. These are communications between Valtari traders and buyers across the galaxy. Some of those buyers are from council member species. Some are from governments that sit in council chambers and talk about peace and justice. You knew. Many of you knew and did nothing. The representatives went pale. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity will remember who stood with us and who stood aside, Hannah continued. When this is over, there will be a reckoning. Not just with the Valtari, but with everyone who enabled them. The council delegation left without achieving anything, but word of the meeting spread. 3 smaller species announced they were joining the human coalition. They brought ships and supplies. More importantly, they brought moral support. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ji-won Song led her squadron on a series of raids. They hit the last slave facilities scattered across the galaxy. Each operation was quick and precise. They would jump in, rescue the captives, and jump out before enemy reinforcements arrived. In one system, they found a small group of children who had been sold to a mining operation. The children were working in dangerous conditions, barely fed, treated worse than machines. Ji-won personally carried 3 of them to the transport. She was crying inside her helmet, but her voice was steady as she coordinated the rescue. Captain Minho Choi and a team of special forces infiltrated the Valtari homeworld. It was a dangerous mission. They needed intelligence on the planet's defenses. They needed to know where the last captive humans were being held. The team moved through the planet's underworld, using contacts that Hana's network had established. They bribed informants. They hacked security systems. They gathered data. What they found was shocking. Overlord Krell kept a personal collection of human slaves in his palace. These were not workers or servants. They were trophies, rare specimens that he showed to visitors. Among them, Minho's surveillance caught an image of an older woman. The intelligence team ran facial recognition. The result made Admiral Kim stop breathing. It was his sister, taken 30 years ago when she was 8, now 48 years old.
Still alive.
Still captive. Taeyang sat alone in his quarters looking at the photo. 3 decades. He had been searching for her his entire adult life. She had been in Krell's palace the whole time. His hands shook with rage, with grief, with determination. The final assault on the Valtari homeworld began 3 days later. The combined human and coalition fleet was the largest force ever assembled. Over 1,500 warships, 100,000 troops. The Valtari threw everything they had at the invaders. Their defense fleet was desperate and determined. They fought with the fury of a dying empire trying to survive, but they were not fighting just humans anymore. They were fighting freed slave species who remembered centuries of oppression. They were fighting species who had finally found the courage to resist. The space battle was fierce but short. Human tactics had evolved over 18 months of constant warfare. They knew how to exploit Valtari weaknesses. They knew how to coordinate with their allies. They knew how to win. When the orbital defenses fell, the ground invasion began. Minho led the assault on the palace personally. He knew where the captives were. He knew they had to move fast before Krell could execute them. The palace guards fought hard, but they were no match for human marines who had been fighting for over a year. Minho's team cut through the defenses like a knife. They found Overlord Krell in his throne room. He was old and surrounded by his final guards. He looked at the humans with contempt. "You are making a mistake," Krell said. "I am willing to negotiate. Name your price. I can give you wealth beyond imagination." Minho did not even respond. He shot the guards and had Krell arrested before the alien could say another word. The captive humans were found in the lower levels of the palace. 47 people. Some had been there for decades. They were thin and scarred and broken. Admiral Kim flew down to the surface personally. He walked through the palace to the holding area. He saw the freed captives being treated by medics, then he saw her. His sister. She looked up at him with empty eyes. She did not recognize him. 30 years had erased everything. "Sora," he said quietly, using her name. Something flickered in her eyes. The name was familiar. Old memories tried to surface. "I am your brother," Taeyang said. Tears ran down his face. "I came to take you home." Sora stared at him. Then slowly she started crying. She remembered. Not everything, but enough. The Valtari Empire surrendered within the day. They had no fleet left. Their homeworld was occupied. Their leadership was captured. The empire that had ruled for millennia was finished. Overlord Krell was brought before a tribunal. Representatives from dozens of species attended. Evidence was presented. Names were read. Every crime was documented. Krell showed no remorse. He insisted that slavery was tradition, that weaker species were meant to serve the strong, that humans had no right to judge an ancient culture. Dr. Hana Park stood and addressed the tribunal. "No culture has the right to enslave children. No tradition justifies what was done. The Valtari took over 50,000 human children. They took millions of beings from other species. They profited from suffering. That ends today." The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. The last human captive was found 2 weeks after the homeworld fell. A young man who had been sold to a collector in a distant system. With his rescue, the total count was complete. Every abducted human had been located. Living or dead, every single one. Admiral Taeyang Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship one final time as a wartime commander. His sister was in the medical bay beginning her long recovery. Thousands of children were on their way back to Earth. The mission was complete. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. 18 months ago, we went to war. We fought against an empire that thought we were weak. We proved them wrong. We kept our promise. Every child is coming home. Across the fleet, humans and their allies celebrated. They had won. Against all odds, against superior numbers, against an ancient enemy, they had won. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had shown what determination could achieve. They had shown that evil could be defeated. They had shown that children were worth fighting for. The war was over. The children were coming home.